أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم. We have been studying 23rd word, first chapter, which is an interpretation of the verse. Indeed, we have created man on the most excellent of patterns, then sent him down to the lowest of the law, except those who believe and do good deeds. So this was the topic, and we studied the first chapter, first point, which starts as we shall explain in 5 points only 5 of the virtues of belief out of thousands. And we studied first point. Anybody wants to make a summary?
The parts that I can remember is the first point was saying that, like, since the verse is talking about the value of the human, he says that the human is created in the most excellent pattern, but also it is possible that he goes or she goes to the lowest of the law. So it defines a kind of a continuum of the value for humanity. Here in this first chapter, the author kind of defining what value is, and he was giving us a description of human and description of the value of the human. From the light of the belief, if light enters the human, if the light of belief enters the human becomes the inscription of the divine art, inscriptions of the divine names, and acquires a value worthy of paradise. This is what the human is. On the other hand, if belief is not there, it's nothing but the darkness, and the human becomes the worthy of hell, lowest of the low. And then the author said the belief in that sense is a relation. It relates a human to the divine creator or the Lord, all glorious maker. And when we have this relationship or relation between glorious maker and the human has the value, again, it becomes the divine art. On the other hand, when we sever a relation with unbelief, it becomes a worthless piece of material. So that's what I remember in a nutshell.
So then the first sentence, which was saying, through the light of belief, man rises to the highest of the high, and through the darkness of unbelief, man descends to the lowest of the law. So as if so belief is a light in here, and as belief enlightens me, I start realizing my true value. And my true value is relative to, as I define myself, relative to my true source of existence. If I cut this relation or sever this relation, then I become valueless, which is my hell. Abdurrahman, as you remembered, would you like to add anything to this summary?
I mean, it's not just that you become valueless when there isn't belief, it's just everything becomes valueless, and you are in hell. So, and I guess we don't see, like, we're always like somewhere in the middle. Sometimes we're in some degree of hell, and because of that, it pushes us to find belief, and then we find some degree of paradise, and we're always in that, somewhere around there.
So then I will read the last 2 paragraphs of the first point, so that it's going to summarize once again what we told, just to put it into context. Then we start discussing second point for today. Thus, man is such an antique work of art of Almighty God. I am reading from 23rd word, first chapter, first point. the last two paragraphs as a summary of last week's discussion, and then we will continue today with the second point. Thus, man is such an antique work of art of Almighty God. He is a most subtle and graceful miracle of his power, whom he created to manifest all his names and their inscriptions in the form of a miniature specimen of the universe. If the light of belief enters his being, man's being, all the meaningful inscriptions on him may be read. As one who believes, he reads them consciously, and through that relation causes others to read them. That is to say, the dominical art in the man becomes apparent through meanings like, I am the creature and artifact of the all-glorious Maker. I manifest his mercy and munificence. That is, belief, which consists of being connected to the Maker, makes apparent all the works of art in man. Man's value is in accordance with that dominical art, and by virtue of being a mirror to the eternally besought one. In this respect, insignificant man becomes God's addressee and a guest of the sustainer, worthy of paradise, superior to all other creatures. However, should unbelief, which consists of the severance of the relation, enters man's being, should unbelief enter man's being, then all those meaningful inscriptions of the divine names are plunged into darkness and become illegible. For if the Maker is forgotten, the spiritual aspects which look to him will not be comprehended. They will be as though reversed. The majority of those meaningful sublime arts and elevated inscriptions will be hidden. The remainder, those that may be seen with the eye, will be attributed to lowly causes, nature, and chance, and will become utterly devoid of value. While they are all brilliant diamonds, they become dull pieces of glass. His importance looks only to his animal physical being. And as we said, the aim and fruit of his physical being is only to pass a brief and partial life as the most impotent, needy, and grieving of animals. Then it decays and departs. See how unbelief destroys human nature and transforms it from diamonds into coal. So this was last week's discussion. Before we pass to second point, any comments, questions?
One sentence I really like when he says, that is, belief which consists of being connected to the Maker, makes apparent all the works of art in man. So man, or human, from a belief perspective, is full of arts. Everything we have, I guess it will be discussed in the second chapter, maybe all the weaknesses, all the needs we have, they become a dominical art from a belief perspective. But from an unbelief perspective, as in the second paragraph, a human becomes an ugly being. Like when you look at the humankind from an outside, what you see, they populate, invade everywhere, just consume everything, even lower than the animal beings, because most of the things they try to do with their physical body, there are always an animal which makes it better than humans. So they're lower than most of the animals in the nature. With your favorite movie, like a reference to your movie, Yusuf, with Agent Smith's words, they look like a parasites. What is the word? Is the parasite? Am I pronouncing right?
Yes.
Okay. They look like parasites, right? They're not even animals. They just go consume, destroy, and then try to go somewhere else. Like today, for instance, like nowadays, we're discussing about populating a space. world is not enough, we have to conquer Mars, we have to go to the Mars, colonize there, moon, whatever. We have to find somewhere. Otherwise we will, kill each other or destroy the environment. So this is the humankind from an outside view. But through belief, human becomes a divine art. It reveals, it says, all the works of art in man becomes apparent. So they're there, but you have to look with a glass of belief to see them. And without this glass, it's really easy to see, look and discuss humankind.
Any comments from online participants?
Assalamu alaikum. In the last paragraph, there was a point which is like really connected what Birkan was focusing on in my world, that I think it is the second sentence of the last paragraph you read. For if the maker is forgotten, the spiritual aspects which look to him will not be comprehended. They will be as though reversed. And it continues, the majority of those meaningful sublime arts and elevated inscription will be hidden. The remainder, those that may be seen with the eye. This is the definition of remainders. It reminded me like look, I look at the man and I see a unit which consists of different parts. This is what I see. But when I look at his being here and the how he is here, then I see that the world is organized like a home for him, and this is to me it's through the eyes of belief, or if this is his being here cannot be by itself, cannot be by the things around him. He must be brought here by whatever the source of the existence of this universe. So this being, this man, is a guest here because he's brought here, and this place is prepared for him here. But when I really cut this, when I don't see him being here as the guest, which means like when I don't look at him through the eyes of belief, his bodily being becomes worthless and meaningless, and his struggle becomes meaningless. That's how I understood it, but it's still not clear in my, or maybe I need a little bit more explanation if you would like to put your comments as well. Thank you very much.
Baba, I'm zooming. Do you like me to zoom?
Sure.
Jazakallah khair. Especially for Jacob's comments. Good, Jazakallah khair. Yes. Okay. So, if there is no other comment, we can start reading the second point.
Bismillah. Just as belief is a light which illuminates man and makes legible all the missives of the eternally besought one, inscribed upon him, so too it illuminates the universe and delivers the past and the future from darkness. I shall explain this mystery with a comparison I saw during a vision, which concerns one meaning of the verse. God is the protector of those who believe. He leads them out of darkness into light. It was like this. I saw in a vision an awesome bridge built between two high mountains situated opposite one another. Beneath the bridge was a valley of great depth. I was on the bridge. A dense darkness had enveloped every part of the world. I looked to my right and saw a vast grave swathed in an unending dense gloom. That is, I imagined it. I looked to my left and as though saw violent storms and calamities gathering amid terrifying waves of blackness. I looked beneath the bridge and imagined I saw a profound abyss. I had a dim torch in the face of this terrifying darkness. I used it and could see a little with its light. A most horrific situation appeared to me. In fact, such awful dragons, lions, and monsters appeared around me and on the bridge in front of me that I exclaimed, "Oh, this torch brings me only trouble." And I angrily cast it to the ground and broke it. Then, on smashing it, the darkness suddenly dispersed, as though I had turned on the switch for a huge electric lamp that lit up the whole world. Everywhere was filled with the lamp's light. It showed everything as it was in reality. I saw that the bridge I had seen was a highway through a plain passing over even ground. The vast grave I had seen on my right, I realized consisted from top to bottom of beautiful, verdant gardens and gatherings for worship, service, conversation, and the remembrance of God under the direction of luminous men. The precipices and peaks on my left, which I had imagined to be tempestuous, and stormy, I now saw fleetingly to be a vast, lovely, and elevated place of feasting, recreation, and enjoyment behind mountains that were adorned and pleasant. And the creatures I had thought to be terrifying monsters and dragons, I saw were familiar domestic animals like camels, oxen, sheep, and goats, declaring, "All praise be to God for the light of belief." I recited the verse, "God is the protector of those who believe. He leads them out of darkness into light." And I awoke from my vision. Thus, the two mountains were the beginning and end of life, that is, this world and the intermediate realm. The bridge was the road of life. To the right was the past, and to the left the future. As for the small torch, it was the human ego, which is egotistical, relies on what it knows, and does not heed the heavenly revelation. Thus the two mountains were the beginning and end of life, that is, this world and the intermediate realm. The bridge was the road to life. To the right was the past, and to the left the future. As for the small torch, it was the human ego, which is egotistical, relies on what it knows, and does not heed the heavenly revelation. The things imagined to be the monsters were the events and strange creatures of the world. Thus one who relies on his ego, who falls into the darkness of heedlessness and is afflicted with the blackness of misguidance, resembles my first state in the vision, which, like with a pocket torch, and due to deficient and misguided knowledge, saw the past in the form of a huge grave amid darkness imbued with non-existence. It showed the future to be a stormy and desolate wasteland, governed by coincidence and events and beings, which are all submissive officials of one all-wise and all-compassionate to be monsters. Such a person as though manifests the verse. And those who reject belief, their protectors are the evil ones. They lead them out of light into darkness. And those who reject belief, their protectors are the evil ones. They lead them out of light into darkness. But if such a man attains to divine guidance, and belief enters his heart, and if the tyranny of his soul is smashed, and he heeds God's book, he will resemble my second state in the vision. Then the universe will suddenly take on the color of day and be filled with divine light. The world will recite the verse, God is the light of the heavens and the earth. Then he will see with the eye of the heart that the past is not a vast grave, but where the groups of purified spirits, who each century having performed their duties of worship, under the leadership of a prophet or saint exclaim, God is most great, on completion of their duties of their lives, and fly to elevated abodes, moving on to the past. He will look to the left, and through the light of belief, distinguishing in the distance of a feasting place of the most merciful, set up in palaces of bliss in the gardens of paradise.
I guess there is an issue with the translation, with the previous sentence. So I will reread it. Then he will see with the eye of the heart that the past is not a vast grave, but there the groups of purified spirits who, each century having performed their duties of worship under the leadership of a prophet or saint, exclaim, God is most great, on completion of the duties of their lives, and fly to elevated abodes, moving on to the future, not to the past, but to the future.
He will look to the left, and through the light of belief, distinguishing in the distance of a feasting place of the most merciful, set up in palaces of bliss in the gardens of paradise, beyond the mountainous revolutions of the intermediate realm and the hereafter. And he will realize that the storms and earthquakes and the tempestuous events are all submissive officials, and understand that they are the means for instances of wisdom, which through apparently harsh are in fact most gentle, like the storms and rains of spring. And he will realize that the storms and earthquakes and the tempestuous events are all submissive officials, and understand that they are the means for instances of wisdom, which though apparently harsh, are in fact most gentle, like the storms and rains of spring. He will even see death to be the introduction to eternal life, and the grave the door to everlasting happiness. You can deduce further aspects for yourself, apply the reality to the comparison.
Very beautiful reading, isn't it?
Yes, I am glad that he is here so that we didn't have to ask Abdurrahman for his horrible reading.
Yeah, I would have butchered it. I'm actually glad he read it.
Inshallah, he will come next week as well.
Inshallah, so that we will not need
And then I will stop coming.
So, let's take a quick summary from someone, and then we can start discussing. Who wants to make a quick summary, overall summary of maybe a few sentences? I will make a few sentences of main points. Just read it from the beginning. The second point is about just as belief is a light which illuminates man and makes legible all the missives of eternally besought one inscribed upon him, upon man. So belief illuminates man. So too, belief illuminates the universe and delivers the past and the future from darkness. So in the previous one, man was either falling into darkness because of unbelief, or with belief, this divine art was becoming legible or readable on man, because man was being illuminated. Likewise, the universe is being illuminated with light of belief, or vice versa. So a summary of the story, a metaphor, anyone? Let's first look at online participants. There's Awesome, Amin, Faraz, Hatice Beyza, Maryam and Zainab, Muhammad Saeed, and Shema. Anyone wants to make a quick summary so that we can move forward with a deeper discussion? Yes, Awesome. I saw your hidden hand being raised. So much hidden.
Do you hear his silent words?
If it's hidden, it can't be seen.
Yes, go ahead. Jazakallah khair.
Okay, no, so I'm still thinking about it. So second point. So it's about the the meaning that you get, that when it's legible, then it makes sense to you. That's how the author is defining what belief is, because if without the meaning, then the whole universe doesn't make sense. You yourself will not make sense. So that's how meaning illuminates everything. And in the example also, it depends on how one sees the meaning. If things seem, take a negative aspect to them, or you don't realize what their true meaning is, then everything seems very horrible, dark, as his example was, where when he looks in the, being stuck in that bridge where everywhere is just trouble for him, disaster, and just like in a horrible kind of situation. Whereas if, because there's so much darkness, there is no light and there is no questioning or meaning to it. But with the meaning, every human being, if they realize what the meaning is, then the light of belief comes in, and legible meaning it makes sense to the individual who is trying to see what the meaning is. So that was at least the example where when everything becomes light, then things start to become much clearer, and it's whatever was dark and whatever reliance was on the on anything in terms of like the part of the small flashlight, which he equated to being the human ego. So that shows that if the human ego tries to brighten up or try to explain your whole world or your whole existence, then it's not really going to be clear. It's going to be it won't work rightfully for you. So that's why one has to really pay attention and try to get the meaning from whatever they're experiencing and seeing. So all those events, everything that he points out, and they, even the disasters and everything, they become missives, as he explains in the first the first sentence at least, that everything becomes a message that is, somebody is saying that, this is coming from the ghaibi, the unseen, or the one who is in charge or running this whole universe, or the eternally besought one, that everything is seeking that being for their existence. That was my summary.
Jazakallah khair. It's a beautiful summary. So let's jump into the text. I can pose some questions in general, but before starting, so the author was specifically mentioning 2 verses, or even the two parts of the same verse. So God is the protector of those who believe. He leads them out of darkness into light. So he was, with his metaphor, he was alluding to this verse. God is the protector of those who believe. He leads them out of darkness into light. And those who reject belief, their protectors are the evil ones. They lead them out of light into darkness. So while talking about the metaphor, we can try to understand how did the author understood this verse, because it's the interpretation of this verse. In the Arabic of this verse, God is the protector. Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu. So there's this word wali. And when it comes to the second part of the verse, as for the unbelievers, their wali, their awliya protector, is the evil ones, as the translation says, or taghut in the original text. Taghut.
Okay.
So
Taghut means what? Isn't it something about the evil human?
Taghut, so it is, I guess, historical translation of it would be the idols. But Nursi's interpretation of Taghut is the human ego or the ideology of nature. So sort of the things that we attribute divine qualities, although they are not divine.
Okay.
So like idols were one example of that, I guess, historically. And correct me if I'm wrong, especially for us. This is what I understand from Taghut. And he says, they lead them out of light into darkness. So these are the two sides of the verse. And author is as if explaining this verse with this before and after part of the story. Okay, so how shall we proceed? So then I will pose a few questions, and either if anybody would like to answer them, you can answer them, or if you would like to point to anything specific in the metaphor and its truth, we can also go with that. So the author was talking about past and future being dark. He saw himself as if he is on a bridge, and under the bridge was an abyss, and he saw as if he was surrounded by monsters which are attacking him too, or about to attack him. And he saw a graveyard to his right, and to his left he saw a storm. And right and left in here, I guess, is as you go with the Arabic text, you read from right to left. So as you start from right, whatever is at your right stays at the back, and left is at the future front. So still you are going to come right in there. So this is, I guess, the way he uses right and left as past and the future. Definitely, yes, past is dark for me, future is another darkness for me. Past is like a graveyard, future is a darkness of uncertainty and potential threats for me. But in such a setup, he talks about a flashlight, a torch, with which he can see his surroundings. By using it is even making things worse because of its small light. He sees things even further distorted, which increases his despair. And he says, as the truth of it, this is my ego. And when he defines his ego, he says, let me see. Okay, as for the small torch, it was the human ego, which is egotistical, relies on what it knows, and does not heed the heavenly revelation. So my question is going to be, the first question, what does it mean to heed divine revelation? Shall I not use my ego? What does it mean that my ego is going to be a source of darkness or even make things worse for me versus why shall I heed the divine revelation? This is the first. Another question is, he says, once he breaks the torch, then on smashing it, the darkness suddenly dispersed as though I had turned on the switch for a huge electric lamp that lit up the whole world. Everywhere was filled with the lamp's light. It showed everything as it was in reality. So now he is talking about some sort of a interesting point of previously what he saw was imagination or a distorted interpretation of what he was seeing. But with the light of revelation, as if things starting to appear as they are. What does that mean? It showed everything as it was in reality. What sort of reality is talking about in here? Both of them seems to be perception of the man. So what makes one of them more real than the other one? This might be our second question. These are the ones that I have. Any further questions, comments, answers? Please go ahead.
I'll start. When it says heavenly revelation, I think for sure it doesn't mean the Quran. Like it must be, it doesn't mean the Quran, like the word, the speech. Maybe it's a part of it. Doesn't.
Does not, okay.
Maybe because if I read a verse and I don't understand it, I can't just obey it or follow it or listen to it. It'd be inhuman of me. It wouldn't help me. However, the understanding I am able to grasp from the verse, or I would rather say heavenly revelation is more just you looking at the creation, the world, which includes the Quran, and then following heavenly revelation is just following the truth of what things are saying, or like the truth of like what things are concluding or what must be. Like reading it without an egotistical mind, or an egotistical mind, you would be looking at things biased and attributing things to yourself, which is not the reality. So I think heavenly revelation, if I just look at it as if it's just talking about Quran, I think it would like get rid of a lot of it wouldn't make too much sense for me.
Okay. We are ready to stone him after the discussion, so don't worry, online participants. Things are under control here. Yes, what do you think about this comment? Rahman is against Quran, has it? No comment? Okay, third point.
Okay. We will comment. Don't go to third. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to stop you going from the third comment. Hopefully other people are thinking of some comment. So this is this is nice. I was also thinking about the question you raised about like this torch and the exclamation that this torch brings me only trouble. And I angrily cast it to the ground and broke it. Then on smashing it, as if a switch lamp came on. So this is interesting because we how can I say this? There is there's a kind of tyranny and oppression of meaning, which is a strange thing to say, but it's important to say because I feel like we resist this idea, like the tyranny of meaning, that meaning doesn't leave you alone, like it doesn't let you be at peace, like it's a real, as I subjectively experience this, it is like real oppression, real torture. And people want to run away from it. It's in so many ways. A lot of what happens in civilization or like in a shallow kind of way of living where people find it difficult to face this fact of inadequate, unsatisfying, dissatisfactory meaning, and it tortures and oppresses people. This meaning, that it doesn't let you alone until you. And so, what the general response is not this, that when somebody says this torch brings me only trouble, the next thing, I angrily cast it to the ground and broke it. That takes a lot of, I think we should recognize in this moment, especially our culture does not, I don't want to say culture, how shall I say? I guess the world is moving towards ease. The narrative of the world has been increased rationality, increased scientific achievement, more ease, high quality of life, less suffering, less pain. So this is the kind of trajectory of thought promoted around the world, and most people have kind of bought it. Even, for example, if you look at me, my father, when I was growing up, he said, you have to go look for a better life. So he said, you have to go to America, look for a better life. What is better life? More ease, more material ease, more. So this is what we live. This is, this is the accepted norm, that look for an easier, better life. And so, again, one doesn't want to be against this principle, right? It's more complicated than that. You don't want to say, Isa, I can't comment if you.
Sorry.
So, and so we don't want to oppose this, right? We don't want to completely, tooth and nail argue against the idea that we should not look for ease. But neither do we, or we want to also recognize that if you push this too far in a sort of one-sided way, you become blind to this implication where when I do find things that are not fitting, that don't add up, they don't make sense, and that I'm not going to kind of just brush them under the carpet, or I'm not going to sort of keep shining for the last time, Isa.
Sorry.
Please go downstairs then.
No.
And then I can't turn my torch, to I'm seeing all these horrific things. Let me turn my torch to some nice things, look at the bright side of life. So this is very powerful, and it's very difficult to cast this torch to the ground and break it. And what I think that what happens is with the torch, I am trying to see things, and when I break it, then I'm not trying to see things, I'm starting to hear other things, kind of. So I become more receptive. I start to hear, I start to, he goes on to say, declaring, all praise be to God. And the two, he now saw fleetingly something else. So as if, I'm blinded by this light, but I'm also afraid to give it up because it's the only way I think I have to see. And so I have to make the distinction that, breaking the light is not that you're, and I'm just copying someone else's words. These are not my words, but I find them relevant. I think that, the manner of engaging the world is different from the matter of engaging the world. So the manner in which I engage, it doesn't change. It is still me, There's still me. But what I see and what I hear can change. So I think this breaking of the torch shouldn't be considered as, that the matter of engagement is going to change. It's no longer me who's going to see it. That doesn't, make sense. It's still you, it's still me. But it is that the manner of engagement, the torch is should stand for the manner of engaging, manner of reading. It's not easy to break it. It's very, it's easy to say this, most undergraduate students that I speak to, like you have, you need many months to kind of convince them that there is no such thing as happiness as they understand it, that this idea that I want to be happy and this will make me happy, and to kind of shake them out of that idea that things are good and everything is good and we are happy and we can be happy. It's a very when I recently spoke to people, a couple of students asked me, so this is very dark, like wouldn't this have a very negative effect on your psyche? Like if I start to think like this, like I feel depressed and I feel very negative. And it's not so quick that, like you kind of, I don't know if it is that quick as this text presents, you smash it and suddenly the darkness dispersed and suddenly a switch came on. I mean, I think somebody who's teaching this idea should say this or can say this, that suddenly it happens, because you don't want to, sound like, it won't happen suddenly. It's going to take a long time. So the person is like, okay, this is really difficult, so I shouldn't try this. So when you want to encourage people, you put it like this, that suddenly something will change. But in practice, the suddenness might actually take quite a bit of time and effort, that to experience this suddenness. I don't know. I'm just, hopefully by now somebody else has a more meaningful comment, but this is, I find it quite interesting. In the past couple of weeks, I've interacted with some professors who were teaching Nietzsche and philosophy and their whole course, and and my own students, like, and this has been a recurring theme where people are trying to teach students that their idea of happiness and good is shallow and untrue, and there's nothing to be happy about, really. And it's very difficult, and even when you succeed, it's terrifying to succeed in convincing people that everything is really dark, because it's not immediately clear to them that suddenly you come up with, then you see it's so dark, but now here is the light, and then you've convinced them that it's all dark, and suddenly you offer a big lamplight. They will continue to be suspicious of that, like, okay, whatever, you just told me everything is dark, and suddenly now if I see this, like, this is going to now again make me so happy, but I've just become suspicious of happiness. So it's not very easy to actually feel disappointed and then come to feel that this time what you are now facing is truly enjoyable and truly lovable and truly and so it needs really a very serious, and because once somebody is honest enough, and this is my last comment, I promise, if somebody is really honest enough to see be troubled by what the torch shows in the analogy, and is honest enough to actually break it, then they are not going to be someone who is then readily, easily convinced by things that don't really make sense. So it's a very deeply honest path, or way to be in the world, but at the same time then it demands a lot of this kind of honesty that says break this torch, has to then be followed up with equally honest and truthful answers of why, where the lamplight, is it really lamplight? So you can't slip in, after this kind of honesty, you can't slip in assumptions and cultural explanations and apologetic kind of things. Well, you have to believe this, you have to, that doesn't then work with this kind of approach. So anyway, this is powerful, and because meaning, this is really if somebody takes the demand for meaning seriously, it's really torture, and you can't hold on to simple ideas of happiness and joy anymore.
Jazakallah khair. So then, I guess I was posing it as two questions. Now, after Faraz's comments, my questions increased to three. I realized that I need to split the first question into two, maybe. So, when he talks about egotism of humanity, as for the small torch, it was the human ego, which is egotistical, relies on what it knows. So this is, I guess, how he is defining human ego. So why does relying on what I know is bad in here? This is the first part. Second part, and it does not heed the heavenly revelation. This is, so relying on my own knowledge and not heeding the divine revelation is putting me into darkness. This is how he defines egotism or egotisticalness of me. First, why is this giving me darkness? Second, why do I need heavenly revelation to give the meaning or light that I look for? Is it not possible for me to find truth by myself? This is the second. What was the third question? I guess I forgot the third question. So still,
Third question was...
Anyways, so I forgot the third, but still, these are the two. Oh yeah, the third one was, it showed everything as it was in reality.
Oh yeah.
So how is it that one is better than the other? Like, aren't they just, well, this is a point of view, the other one is another point of view. What makes it one the reality and the other one being just an illusion? How can I make such a distinction? So these are three questions. Khadija Beyza made a comment, or no, she shared the link for the third time. Jazakallah khair. Okay.
So I'm trying to understand, or let's say digest what Faraz said. So Faraz, when you say like everything is dark in reality, there is no such happiness, are you referring to the first state of the dream when author says, in this world, using my torch, I was trying to find the meaning, I was trying to understand things, I was trying to illuminate them with my torch, and in such a and to such a human in such a state, Faraz, you are saying that like using your torch to illuminate things or finding happiness with your torch is futile. There is no such thing that you cannot illuminate the world. What you're going to have is nothing but darkness. So you have to accept this. Is that what you are saying when you say everything is dark?
Or the way I would, I guess, formulate it is, as I try to, with an egocentric perspective, try to give meaning to existence from putting myself at the center of things, I am not able to figure out what the existence is for if I take myself at the center.
So I have to accept, like, through my own tools, if I rely on my own tools, I have to accept that there is nothing but darkness. And this acceptance of the darkness through my tools opens the possibility of the new realm, which is the revelation. And smashing my, the torch, refers to this acceptance. and it's nothing but darkness through lens of my ego. And once I smash, when I close my eyes, I'm trying to catch Faraz's the style. When I close my eyes, when I stop try to see it, I start hearing, meaning I start my other faculties, which makes me connected to the revelation. And through these faculties, everything is being illuminated.
So can we say that when I try to illuminate existence, and I, in this case, meaning, so I do exist by myself. I take my existence for granted. So I define everything relative to this quote-unquote fact. This is my fact. And from this lens, I am trying to give meaning to everything. So if I exist by myself, yet I don't have control over future. Tomorrow is not part of me. It's external to me, and it's like a threat to me. Past was part of me, apparently, but it's not part of me anymore. It's gone. So it's another source of darkness. So just the very faulty perspective of taking me as an entity, an external entity that exists by itself. So this is what I am understanding from egotistical human perspective. This is what makes the whole existence dark for me. The past seems like a grave, future is very stormy, and what I'm walking right now under it's a bridge, but there's an abyss under it. So I cannot even rely on my own existence at the moment. I cannot even live the moment. It's not even giving me any sort of a joy, because I know that threats are all over the place. I do not even rely. I cannot even, although I assume that I exist by myself, I cannot even. I know how weak of a thing it is. Although I believe in it, I know that it's not reality either. So this is what's putting me into darkness. So smashing this understanding of I do not exist by myself, or what sort of an existence do I have really? Then breaking this gives me the opportunity to define everything relative to a source which is not of type of this universe. And I guess this is where it will take me to search for a meaning in things that is defined by or relative to the absolute source. Because initially I was trying to give meaning to things relative to my wrong starting point, which is I exist. And everything, I'm going to label them some meaning relative to my wrong starting point. So in these lines, then, if I repeat my initial question regarding revelation, how does revelation enlighten everywhere in this metaphor? Heeding divine revelation. Yes, Hatice Ferzak, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Not sure if this will answer your question, but I wanted to kind of talk more about the torch, and perhaps discussing the problem more will further hopefully make it easier to understand the heavenly guidance or what the solution to the issue is. As I was listening to Brother Faraz, and the text itself as well, like the torch represents something that is it sheds light on something, but instead of illuminating it, it kind of morphs the reality. Hence, when I drop it or when I throw it onto the ground, then reality with a capital R kind of manifests itself. So the torch then represents something that is contrary to my reality, something that blurs or morphs my understanding of it. And I guess in relation to what Brother Faraz was saying, with the tyranny of meaning, at least as far as what I understood out of it, you know, I guess in a way, kind of that action of throwing the torch is, in the text, he throws it out of anger. Anger, why? Because he sees all of these different scary visions. And I think there's a bit of fear involved there. And then out of anger and fear, he throws it onto the ground. So in a way, like getting fed up with the world, getting fed up with my understanding of the world, rather. How I understand how I exist in relation to everything else around me. And tying this to one of the last points that Brother Yusuf brought up about, you know, I exist and then everything else exists in relation to either me or in relation to themselves. So I guess this anger or this getting fed up with one's own understanding of the world is contrary to living in peace with one's understanding of the world. And that fear or anger arising from, I guess, like part of it could be wanting control, wanting to be happy, wanting purpose in what I do, because I strive and things may or may not go the way I want them to, but then at the end it kind of adds up to nothing. Or not even at the end, right now it adds up to nothing, and definitely later on it's going to add up to nothing as well. And I guess that's the honesty aspect of it, demanding that sort of one being honest with themselves or in their unhappiness with the way everything seems to be existing in relation to one another, in relation to me, in relation to how I perceive my existence. So then the heavenly guidance or the cure to this dilemma must be one that more vaguely, you know, fixes or allows me to see reality as it is. But what does that mean? I guess something that makes everything meaningful for me, and something that makes things meaningful for me, and what makes things meaningless for me, or what makes things multiplied by zero, if you will, is their worth in relation to themselves or myself, or how I view them. So the guidance, the solution must be one that changes my understanding of it, or allows me to see them as they are. And in that, you know, that initial, like, you know, the throwing away of the torch is kind of something extra to my reality that is morphing my reality. It's kind of letting go of something that does not really hold, that is not supposed to be there in a way, and then just letting things exist as they should. I'm not sure if that answers your question. That wasn't my purpose anyway, but just sharing my thoughts on what was on my mind. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. Faraz says yes, and crucially, it affirms the meaningfulness of my finding things meaningless and torturous at the start. It affirms the meaningfulness of my finding things meaningless and torturous at the start. So, at the first stage, the initial stage, this man being in darkness, finding things meaningless, and being tortured by meaninglessness is a meaningful thing, but it becomes apparent to me right after I smash the torch. Am I understanding you correct, Faraz? Would you like to elaborate more? Says yes.
So, Faraz, do you mind, like, at least shortly open up what you mean with the tyranny of the meaning.
Sorry, yeah. This comes from my Irish Canadian roommate when I first came to America, and he was he used to drink different kinds of fluids. He says with me. So, and he would, and we would have discussion like why it is necessary for him to feel that way, and he said like if only I could accept that things I don't understand and they don't have meaning, and if only I could be at peace with that. But it doesn't leave me alone. Like I get tortured by the fact that why things are happening this way, or there's a lack of meaning in different kinds of things, more basic existential questions and political questions and questions, all kinds of things. They bother, and there is no answer. And that there is no answer bothers me. This is what really bothered him, is that why the lack of answer bothers me. This he found like intolerable. And so, and this is again one instance in a sense that it's not only what he means, but I also think the tyranny of meaning like the search for meaning drives an honest person nuts. It doesn't leave you honest. I mean, because, and you can see the tyranny of all the efforts that we every day make to cover things up, to put a balm on the wounds that, it brings. We just, I'm missing my mom. Okay. Instead of thinking about what it means, let me just call her and speak to her. Something is happening. Let me do something to address that need, but without really, thinking about why do I feel this way? What is this telling me? What can I make of it on my own? What is the best I can do? Like, what is this telling me? And then despairing of, or honestly confronting, what is it telling me? And if it tells me that, okay, I really want to be, with someone, for example, and that person is not here and I feel tortured by it, and this is reality, or that things have happened and they won't come back and the past is gone, and this really is, intolerable that such precious things are lost forever and not to be returned, or all things that currently of value are going away and they won't come back, and this is intolerable. And to actually, so this is intolerable what, with respect to meaning, it's intolerable. So this tyranny of meaning, I mean just that it creates this conditions, psychologically, mentally, spiritually, however you want to call it, that are intolerable. It or at least maybe ought to be, I guess, if I feel like when I try to strip down my attempts to kind of, blunt the edges, that then it really reveals itself as a sort of this almost, irresistible kind of, in quote unquote tyrannical, commander who's like just not letting me rest, not letting me kind of find any refuge behind anything, and just driving me to, face the fact that everything is very dark, and things being dark is very unacceptable to me. So this is, and I find most people, at least recently I found a couple of people, this is the limit of their, analysis. Like people are just struggling to come to this point because the culture of, how should we call it, shallow happiness is so strong that most people just simply are struggling to come to this point where to say that this idea of happiness is deceptively attractive. It really, have friends or do this, feel better, feel good. It doesn't present itself as completely, and it's not completely wrong either, because there is a sense in it which wants ease, right? It doesn't want burden. And so it is more complex than kind of, simply, you can easily slide all the way on the other side and become a very deep nihilistic cynic and say that, everything that tells us of that this is meaningful or something, is completely trying to deceive. And that again, so this meaning and the search for meaningfulness of things, their terrible meaning that seen from the ego, can actually quite become tyrannical. Like it really needs, you need kind of to negotiate. Okay, I'm not going to accept shallowness, but there is something in me, irresistible wish for hope, that is not completely false, that I cannot just kill it. I cannot say that my wish for peace or ease or desire is itself corrupt, and I need to root it out and just try my best to kind of, and it can go there. So it's the tyranny of meaning is it's tyrannical, because I need to find meaning, but it needs to come in a way that my whole of humanity, all my senses, including particularly this sense of torture at meaninglessness, is also then reconciled. So I said I should be able to look back and say yes to it, right? I shouldn't be able to say, oh, I was deluded then, and that delusion just remains like something negative and bad, and I don't know what was wrong with me. Why did that happen? I don't know. And now this is good, but that was bad. Because then the question is, why was that then? Why was I like that? In that, who let me be in this bad situation for so long? And some people actually never come out of that situation. Their whole life is a witness to the truth of that. For the person who may reach, cross the river or come to the other side, you see many people live and die in this world simply saying that this life, seen from the lens of the ego, is an ugly life. They're actually witnessing to some truth, but they never leave that. So if I consider that stance, a negative and an ultimately negative stance, then questions arise in my mind about the justice of this maker who, lets leave these people in a terrible situation. But actually it's not the case, I think, because in expressing this disposition towards meaninglessness, there's a yes in it. When you say something ugly is ugly, that's yes, that's a positive thing. So to help me understand that when I come to meaning, that it is not some shallow temporary thing, it should be a meaning that encompasses and makes sense of. But anyway, now I've moved beyond your question about tyranny of meaning. What I mean is, like, it doesn't leave you alone if you really pay attention to it. And in fact, it tortures you so much that one can slip into saying that this is just too much, and I'm going to try to find some temporary relief for this kind of thing, because this is too much. It's too much to bear. I don't know if that really opens, but maybe you can say if you find this term not acceptable, or maybe it's a better way of putting things.
No, I guess it's much clearer, at least for me. Maybe for others it was already clear. But for me now it's much clearer, and it's definitely acceptable. Jazakallah khair.
Good. So the ego part somewhat discussed. The other two questions, or another questions. The questions that was posed was, what does it mean that divine revelation or heavenly revelation or heeding heavenly revelation enlightens things for me? Abdurrahman was saying that it's not only Quran, it must be the things speaking to me of their maker. He understood this statement as such. Any other understandings, agreements, disagreements with Abdurrahman? How does divine revelation or heavenly revelation enlighten existence for you? Or how frequently do you go and study heavenly revelation if we would like to take it as Quran? What does it really mean? Any comments?
So just some maybe random thoughts about that. So I was looking at the word, this Tawud, and it really has a root which I guess means transgression, being rebellious. And so when the verse says, and those who reject belief, their protectors are the evil ones, their Tawud. They lead them out of light into darkness. So when we look at these, the first tense verse state that we're trying to look at the reality from our own eyes, from lenses of ego. I guess, at least in my world, in the world I live in currently, I see it as a belief system in which we say, we will define the world. We will define it. We will find the rules. We will tell what is wrong, what is right. I will put the rules. I'm transgressing the order which is there in the universe, and I say, no, I will define the order. I will say how things work. I will say what is natural, what is not natural. I will define what is the limits of reasoning, what is the, outside the reasoning, what is reasonable, what is not reasonable. I will define natural, I will define supernatural. So I will put the rules of the game, and I will try to make sense of things. I guess in that sense, in that stance, in this state of mind, we see nothing but darkness. Because wherever we try to reach, wherever we try to define, we fail. All these years of trials, humankind trying to define things by themselves, or after all these years, 38 years.
I thought it was 26 up until anyways.
When necessary it's 38, when necessary it's 26.
Okay.
After all these 38 years trying to define things, I fail. So I guess the revelation in that sense is realizing that my experience, what I see, what I observe, I cannot make sense of it by myself. When I try to rely on myself, I fail. Everything becomes dark. So I cannot find the meaning with your words. So relying or heeding the revelation, I guess, means that just accepting this fact. As the author says, smashing the torch. Accepting that my transgression doesn't work. I need a source to tell me, the source of the order, the source of the myself, whoever created me, tell me what is the order in the universe. So this is what I understand from hearing or relying on the revelation, just accepting this fact. And how it illuminates, I guess it puts everything in place. So things I see as unacceptable, unbearable, becomes clear and becomes meaningful for me. I used to find, the unsuccess unbearable. I have to be successful. But through revelation, I learned that my unsuccess actually was there for a purpose. it was a messenger on duty telling me something, and if I know how to listen it, it becomes something I yearn for. Like when I see the beauty or meaning in the unsuccess, when it is necessary, I desire for unsuccess when it is necessary. Like it becomes my dua, saying that, oh, the creator of the unsuccess and the success, make me unsuccessful when it is better for me, when it will take me out of illusion, when it will put me in, let's use the word, a straight path, make me unsuccessful. When it is right for me, like even realizing that these things can be right for me, like losing a loved one can be something right for me. Having a fight with your friend can be something beautiful or right for me in this specific moment. So as just, in Quran, the Creator promises, I say, the punishment, however you take it, punishment is something I desire for. If I'm on the wrong way, something should happen in my life so that I will, divert my direction to the right way. There should be a hellfire in my life which will burn my hand so that I will take it to the other side where it should be. So I guess the revelation illuminating everything may mean that all the darkness I saw before through the lens of my ego becomes things in properly placed in my life. So that's become a friend for me. Or becoming old becomes a friend for me.
Thank you. And Faraz made a comment for which I will ask for further explanation. I was asking what this revelation or being enlightened by revelation means. He was saying, within quotes, nothing remains to which I can say no. Close quote. Then what is revealed of meaning is divine, Faraz says, to which we are asking for further explanation. So what I understand from this quote, can you read the quote again? Nothing remains to which I can say no. So I guess like this is what I mean with when I say, I say this, the sadness or the previously unbearable things become things that I say it's right for me. So this is what I understand from nothing becomes, I say no. Like I don't say anything, I don't say no to anything. I say, okay, this is right for me. I lose someone, I say, this is right for me. He said yes or no, at least this is what I understand. So one thing that, just to maybe recollect, so once I realized that with my egotistical perspective, I cannot give proper meaning to existence, admitting this, as Birkan, you were saying, then I say, okay, then what is it? Because as Faraz was saying, it's torturing me, so there must be some sort of a meaning, but I cannot figure it out with my own perspective. Here, own perspective, meaning my false perspective of I exist by myself. And I smash this, and then I say, okay, then there must be a meaning for it, in it, but where am I going to get this meaning from? So heavenly revelation in this case should mean the meaning is beyond this material existence itself, because I used to take myself, my material, as my reality, which is my only moment that I live. But once I smash this understanding of existence consists only of the moment or the material, then I say, okay, then there must exist, the meaning that I'm looking for must be revealed to me from on high, I would say, from on high, meaning that there must be something beyond what I observe. Then I will look for such a thing, such a meaning. And in such a case, still it is inevitable, as I see, is I am in need of this guidance. So somebody needs to speak to me. So as Abdurrahman was saying, it might be that when I look at a flower, I will receive some meaning of it, which is, now that I'm not looking at it from my egocentric perspective, and false egocentric, again, what I mean by I exist by myself, then this flower will start talking to me, which I will say this is a heavenly revelation to me through a flower, or a loved one, a daughter, a spouse, a parent, whatever. But then I will recognize it as, it's not something that, because smashing my egocentric perspective opened up this to me. But also, like the scripture itself, the speech of divine that I'm in need of, is another one which clearly tells me, and again with the demonstration in a human form with the messenger, to tell me what it really means. Because, for instance, now studying this with the understanding of Nursi is really making my parents or my daughter, my wife, or flower speak to me. I mean, I was not hearing of their speech unless and until somebody explicitly told me. And this is why I'm attending this discussion. I am in need of still somebody to highlight me this divine speech, which is again in the form of speech. I guess it's also inevitable that I am in need of such a divine revelation. And since after this, then flowers start speaking to me in a way. Or along with this, flowers speak to me. Yes, and remains the third question. Anybody wants to take the third question for within our last 12 minutes?
So to remind you, we're asking, with the torch we see partial stuff, and then revelation comes and everything is illuminated. So
yeah,
what makes the difference between the two, you were saying?
Yeah, the author says it showed everything as it was in reality. As if author is saying that one of them was an illusion, the second one is reality. But one can say, well, one was a perception, the other one was a perception. What makes one illusion, the other one reality? How do you make such a very sharp distinction between the two? Why are you calling one of them as illusion, the other one as reality?
Let's see.
Because as if in the first case, it was the reality of the man in this darkness, that the animals were monsters, or there was a storm, there was a graveyard, this and that, everything. So the author says it was an illusion, actually. I later realized that it was an illusion, and the second case is a reality, he says. So what does he mean by that? Okay. The answer to Yusuf's question, nothing remains to which I can say no. Okay. This is...
So maybe
yes.
I thought your question, you asked about how do I know the first one was illusion? How do I know the second one? Now that I'm getting this meaning, this is not also some kind of illusion. And to me, again, I may be wrong, but to me, the question really, it boils to, or the answer is, if this new conception of what the flower is saying to me, if this new, let's say, translation of the universe, this new, or this claim of what the universe is saying, what by their existence, what is the existence of things telling me about the meaning, if when I look at the world with this meaning, with this lens that it is bringing me, and if there remains anything at all to which I can say, no, this is not perfect, this is not right, or this is not, if there's something to which I can say no, then I will know that this is still illusion. That is how I defined illusion, because I said this must be an illusion. There must be some real meaning that makes sense, because this is not reconciling with how I am. And so as long as it is still leaving me with saying no to something, ultimately no, then I think that is how I will know that, for practically speaking, that's how I will treat it as something that is still dark. It's something that is not illuminated, something that is not, it's, and so that's why I think I would have to think about it till the point where I can include in it, really in my heart and mind, that there is nothing that remains incomplete in its meaning, nothing that its existence, I can say it is perfect. This is perfect. If there's something that about which I can't say this yet, then I will have to carry on more. Then it's not yet truth, then it is still some illusion mixed in it. But maybe I'm wrong about this, I don't know.
Jazakallah khair. Any other comments?
I can go ahead.
Please.
You can talk. After now, because you can talk.
I just wanted to comment on, we're all Muslims here, so I think we look at it in one perspective. But if a non-Muslim were to read this, or if we thought about this from a non-Muslim's perspective, I have a lot of friends who have become atheists over the years, and when I speak to them, they speak very negatively of the world. They see a lot, as he's describing here, the abyss and the monsters, is how they tend to see the world. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them. They see a lot of death, they see a lot of misfortunes, they see people losing limbs and family members. But if they were to submit and say this is all from Allah, then their perspective on the situation would change greatly. If they were to believe in a hereafter and that there's some kind of judgment, their understanding of what's going on in the world would change greatly. And I think that was just one thing that I got from reading this.
So, going off that as well, the reason we know it's reality, and I can't actually absolutely say it is reality, but it's the reality of the darkness. That was a reality for the person. It was dark for him. He did see monsters. That was real for him. It wasn't fake, and he was getting tortured by that. And then again, I guess the huge 100% flip there, and when the light is switched on, and then that's also real for him too, when he sees all that light. But for me, how I can see whether something is real or not is I need to constantly keep questioning it and keep searching. And from my perspective, that's all I can do. And I won't ever be able to completely switch on the lights so I see everything fully and just stay there. But what I can do is I can constantly question something is that truly this evil thing? Or when something I think bad happens, I get sick. Is this the worst thing that happened? Is this meaningless? Is this something that is torture for me? I question it. And then if I start seeing that, sometimes it's saying, no, there is meaning in this. Sometimes there's light and I can see it. And maybe more often than not, I start seeing the light more than I see the darkness in it. And constantly I just keep questioning. And then what's left over is what's real for me. And that is the reality. So you don't have to worry if this is real or fake, because you get to that conclusion by questioning it and looking at it and weighing it with your logic and just experiences. And then whatever conclusion you come to is reality for you. you don't just say, I believe in God, and it's real. I mean, that would be fake.
So I'm going to read Hatice Bey's last comment, but before that, I guess it's easier to understand it in the metaphor, because in metaphor, in darkness, when I don't see things that good, I as if fill in the blanks with my imagination, and I can see a stick in the darkness, and I can imagine to be a snake, for example. But when the light is turned on, I see what it is, and metaphor is very clear and easy to understand in this case. And if it's a snake, it's a snake. I see it, right? So this is the reality of snake, and I can confirm it. And once I understand it, it's reality in the sense that what I call a snake is right there, period. So, and I'm satisfied with it. That's clear, because now with the seeing the snake in light, I can give meaning to it. But in darkness, I was not clearly seeing what was there. I was completing it with my own imagination. This is so why it was becoming my reality, but it was not what's out there. So meaninglessness was torturing me in there. So as if, still I'm speaking about the metaphor, the explanation of what is out there is satisfying me, and this is what I'm understanding from Faraz's and Abdurrahman's comment as well. Once the explanation satisfies me, it is being light for me. But when I see this stick in the darkness, and I see it's snake, but then Nibras from there says, no, it's not snake, but it's just a stick. Somebody else says, well, it's neither stick nor snake, it's a rope. All of them seems to be equally likely to me. So there's some room for uncertainty. But I say, whatever it is, I don't like it, because it is not clear to me. Apparently, within, at least still at the level of metaphor, once the light is on, if it's stick, it's a stick. If it's snake, it's snake. So it's clear to me what it is. But are the things that much clear with the revelation as it explains the existence? Maybe this is a question. After you take comment. So Hatice Bey's comment. Aspects of heavenly revelation, she says. 1, being honest with the tyranny of meaning, parentheses, also known as my own mini hell, though in my acknowledgement of the pain of meaninglessness, it then becomes meaningful. But this was the summary of the previous conversation about tyranny of meaning. So being honest with the tyranny of meaning as found within myself and the universe, parentheses, directions towards the remedy within the acknowledgement of the illness. Hatice Bey, would you like to explain it? Because reading it is going to be tough, I guess. I didn't read the second one. If you are available, please go ahead.
Sure. Sorry, they're a little bit convoluted, but yes. So I was trying to summarize my understanding of it. So in the first aspect, in my recognition or in my acknowledgement or in my honesty with myself of the fact that meaninglessness is painful for me, that I accept that this is not a sort of situation I want to find myself in, that it causes me pain, like probably the greatest pain. It sounds cheesy, but in that realization is kind of a path to trying to find a remedy, because in a way I acknowledge the illness. So if I don't acknowledge the fact that I'm sick or that I need tending to, then I won't seek out a remedy. I won't feel the need to, or I won't recognize my need to rather. So in that sense, the illness, what is causing me discomfort, is pushing me towards that which will give me comfort. And then secondly, this is a little bit of a jump, but in trying to find that which makes things meaningful for me, so everything that I may experience, so is this going to make something in my life meaningful, or is this like going from thing to thing? Is it your job? Is it your family? Is it your, I don't know, position, whatever? You can count different things. nothing of the nature of the universe is permanent. Everything is transient. So in a way, what I seek is something that is steady, that is constant, that is there. So the second aspect, or maybe the secondary step, while still keeping the first aspect, was needing something or someone educating me about an existence of an absolute source, aka something not of the nature of the universe, aka something beyond just the things themselves. And again, this being confirmable within myself and the universe. And I call this remedy part 2, but as in like what is going to be a treatment for the situation I find myself in, but at the same time, I think they're simultaneous, the first and the second one, and interwoven within one another, and cannot be necessarily, the second cannot exist without the first, although the first, I think, is a primary initial step necessary for the second. I hope that clears the question.
Jazakallah khair. And before giving microphone to Birkan, Ayşenur has a comment. Ayşenur, if you are available, would you like to read it yourself?
We can close without my comment because we will be out of time.
Okay, so Ayşenur lost her voice, so I need to voice her comment.
Oh.
There is a three-way relationship between what I experience, the meaning or lack thereof that I extract from the experienced thing, and my own human expectations concerning it.
Could you start from the beginning?
There is a three-way relationship between what I experience, the meaning or lack thereof that I extract from the experienced thing, it's the second, and the third one, my own human expectations concerning it.
Okay.
My experiences, meanings or lack of meaning, and my human expectations concerning my experience. The first two need to be judged and evaluated in light of the third. Experience and meaning should be judged and evaluated in the light of my expectations, my human expectations. If they do not meet my expectations, I have every right to question its reality, because as far as I am concerned, reality should align with my human reality. Again, I see some eyebrows getting not understood. So reading it again. If they do not meet my expectations, the experience and the meaning of experience do not meet my expectations about them, I have every right to question its reality. Our question was, how do I know what is real, what's not? Because as far as I'm concerned, reality should align with my human reality. Rather than wishful thinking, a perception that does align with my human reality - expectation is reality. These were the 2 cents of Ayşenur. Jazakallah khair. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.